Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thanks for being here. Welcome. We practice this thing, Buddhism. A lot of practices and groups and sects out there call what they do Buddhism as well. So it can seem a little confusing at times. In the West, we have no problem understanding that there are Sunni and Shiite Muslims and denominations within those. Certainly, Christianity has a wide array, not only of labeled flavors, but even from church to church, you find they compete for or establish themselves as the only true church. It's just, we human beings can be ridiculous at times. But there is only one source of Buddhism, and that is Shakyamuni Buddha. The collection of his lifelong teachings has been translated many times. Begins with India, then largely to China, which took the scholarship very seriously of the sermons and teachings from India. The Chinese were already very culturally committed to scholarship because of Confucianism and Taoism, and Buddhism represented such a granular, really an expansion of these other thoughts, the Confucianism about how to be a good citizen, and the Taoism about our relationship with the universe and the planet, and then Buddhism comes in and goes, look, this is all happening in the mind. Now look at how that functions. And so it dovetailed right into what they were already thinking and practicing as a culture. So Buddhism went through a lot of analysis in China. And a lot, when that happens, the different editions and interpretations occur. And this is how, for instance, Chan Buddhism started in China, which in Japan becomes Zen Buddhism. But in truth, as we study Shakyamuni and certainly Nichiren, he demonstrates very emphatically that Zen, Chan Buddhism are actually not truly Buddhism. They use the label Buddhism, but they have added their own teachings outside of Shakyamuni's teachings to mold their practice of whatever it is. That's why we call it Zen rather than Buddhism. To say Zen Buddhism is really an oxymoron of sorts. There's a lot of Buddhist flavor in it, but there's their own additions and thoughts about it. So it's really just Zen or Chan, and we should just drop the Buddhism label off of that because it's confusing, right? Anyway, I say all of this because we're going to read a gosho, a letter of Nichiren's, once again to that same family that Nanjo Tokumitsu is from, to the mother, the nun, often called the nun of Ueno. Ueno is the village, the area that this family comes from. She had 9 children, so we've read about the loss of her husband. We've read about the loss of a young son, but there's an extended family there. So, and they have workers, a fiefdom, and a lot going on. So, Nichiren will use a story of Wulung and Ilung, a story we've reviewed quite a while ago. It's been a while. I think I did a video a couple of years ago, specifically on this gosho. But all of this is to say that the story of Wulung and Yilung is from a Chinese scholar who studied Buddhism. And so, just because it's a story that Shakyamuni never talked about doesn't mean that Nichiren won't use it, because it's a cultural, traditional, long-standing story, hundreds and hundreds of years, and it represents a certain teaching. And so there's no reason why Nichiren wouldn't use it as a teaching to help explore the meanings and practice of Buddhism. It's not, strictly speaking, one of what you would call the expedient means of Shakyamuni's teachings. It's an expedient means, but it's a teaching from the history of the Chinese and well known by the Japanese. But it illustrates a concept that certainly exists within Buddhism. So I say all of this because, some people would treat our study of Nichiren and Bodhisattva Nichiren's scholarship and immediately label us Nichiren Buddhists. But as you've heard me say before, we don't practice Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren would not allow you to say that you practice Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren is a Bodhisattva, a scholar of Shakyamuni's Buddhism. And more to the point, the ultimate of Shakyamuni's teachings to be found in the Lotus Sutra. So we're of the Lotus school. We are Lotus Sutra practitioners, but we practice Shakyamuni's Buddhism. And the influence of the scholarship of Buddhism grows as it goes from country to country. And so we absorb a lot of these stories, like the Chinese story here, not because they themselves are Buddhist stories, but as Shakyamuni would remind us, this is why we study broadly all of Buddhist scholarship and non-Buddhist scholarship, because ultimately, if we're studying how our behavior works, how our mind works, how the world works, and how to live this life profoundly and to our maximal potential, which is the only reason to be here, then everything leads back to the core, the Lotus Sutra, the fundamentals that Shakyamuni was trying to teach on awakening this Buddha mind, this proper perception of the awesome and precious nature of this life process, this instantiation process, this manifestation of this thing we call a life. We are a part of a huge cosmic force, if you will, that is what spawns life. Life of you and me, life of the trees and the frogs, life of the entire universe and its planets and stars and gases and so on and so forth. It's all of the same process. And when you see your life in that perspective, suddenly all of the thingness of life gains a much more minute perspective. You gain a perspective that now relinquishes these really dental attachments to thingness. It just becomes so insignificant. It's significant in that we need to understand that it's part of life. We don't throw it away. There's no annihilation in Buddhism. There's just the proper perspective that all of it is this wonderful. When you look at a clear stream of water going by and the fish in the eddies, dancing around in the water, you don't concern yourself a great deal with the occasional bubble or the the aspects of the moss on the rocks and so forth. You appreciate those things. You don't see them as disturbances, as somehow clouding your experience. You accept it all as this beautiful play of life. But to look at one's own life that way is extremely difficult, because samsarically we are so bitten into attachment of everything that we can't let it go. This is where all our suffering comes from, right? So maybe that's the babbling stream analogy. I don't know. But anyway, so enough blah, blah, blah. Let's get into this letter. Wulung and Ilung. I've received 1 horseload of polished rice, 4 to, and a sack of taros, and respectfully chanted Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Always reminding us that offerings, donations to the person Nichiren are really offerings, donations to the propagation of the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren is just a samsaric vessel, if you will. As bodhisattva practice truly is, right? I mean, it's not a cult of personality, hopefully. I am trying to be a vessel to your study and practice of Myoho Renge Kyo. It's not about me, right? Myoho Renge Kyo is likened to the lotus, the great mandara flower in space, in heaven, and the cherry blossom in the human world are both celebrated flowers. But the Buddha chose neither to compare to the Lotus Sutra. Of all the flowers, he selected the lotus blossom to symbolize the Lotus Sutra, right? It is the teaching of the wonderful lotus. There is a reason for this. Some plants first flower and then they produce fruit, while in others, fruit comes forth before flowers. Some bear only 1 flower, but much fruit. Others send forth many flowers, but only 1 fruit. And still others produce fruit without flowering. Thus, there are all manner of plants, but the lotus is the only one that bears flowers and fruit simultaneously. The benefit of all the other sutras is uncertain, because they teach that one must first make good causes, and only then can one become a Buddha at some latter time. With regard to the Lotus Sutra, when one's hand takes it up, that hand immediately attains Buddhahood. And when one's mouth chants it, that mouth is itself a Buddha. As, for example, the moon is reflected in the water the moment it appears from behind the eastern mountains. Or as a sound and its echo arise simultaneously. It is for this reason that the sutra states, quote, if there are those who hear the law, then not a one will fail to attain Buddhahood. This passage means that if there are 100 or 1,000 people who upload this sutra, without a single exception, all 100 or 1,000 of them will become Buddhas. In your letter, you mentioned the anniversary of the passing of your compassionate father, the lay priest Matsuno Rokuro Saimon. You say, quote, since he left many sons behind, memorial services for him will be conducted in as many different ways. I fear, however, that such ceremonies will be slanderous unless strictly based on the Lotus Sutra, end quote. That's a logical concern, right? We today would have similar concerns. Shakyamuni Buddha's golden teaching states, quote, the world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth, end quote. The Buddha Many Treasures gave testimony declaring, quote, the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, all that you, Shakyamuni, have expounded is the truth, end quote. and the Buddhas of the 10 directions gave credence to the sutra's verity by extending their tongues to the Brahma heaven, right? This is all from the Lotus Sutra. To the south, excuse me, to the southwest, across the ocean from Japan, there is a country named China. In that country, some people believe in the Buddha, but not in deities, while others believe exactly the opposite. Perhaps a similar situation existed in the early days of our own country. Be that as it may, in China, there once lived a calligrapher named Wu Lung. In his art, he was without peer in the entire country, just as was Tofu or Kosei in Japan. He hated Buddhism and vowed that he could never transcribe any Buddhist scriptures. As he approached his end, he fell seriously ill. On his deathbed, he expressed his last wishes to his son, saying, quote, "You are my son. Not only have you inherited my skill, but you write with an even better hand than I. No matter what evil influence may work upon you, you must never copy the Lotus Sutra," end quote. Now, as you know, one of the exegetes of the Lotus Sutra, in several chapters of the Lotus Sutra, is a phrase we remember as, if anyone were to embrace, copy, write, read, recite, and propagate the Lotus Sutra, they will attain Buddhahood. So part of our practice is to inscribe, copy the teachings of Buddha. So this is quite a prohibition. It pretty much negates practice. So he goes on. Thereupon blood spurted like fountains from his 5 sense organs. His tongue split into 8 pieces, and his body fell apart in 10 directions. Yet his relatives, ignorant of the 3 evil paths, did not realize that this was an omen that he would fall into hell. So whatever actually happens is quite a colorful example of making a negative cause, especially toward Buddhahood, toward the Lotus Sutra. The son's name was Yi Lung. He, too, proved to be the best calligrapher in China. Obedient to his father's will, he pledged that he would never transcribe the Lotus Sutra, right? He's trying to be a filial son. The ruler of the time was named Suma. He believed in Buddhism and held the Lotus Sutra in especially high regard. He desired to have this sutra transcribed by an excellent calligrapher, so who would he go to? None but the most skilled in all the country, so that he could have a copy of his own. So he summoned Yi Lung. Yi Lung explained that his father's will forbade him from doing so, and beseeched the ruler to excuse him from the task. Hearing this, the ruler called another calligrapher and had him transcribe the entire sutra. The result, however, was far from satisfying, because he wasn't the calligrapher that Yi Lung was. The ruler sent again for Yi Lung and said to him, quote, "Since your father's will forbids you, I will not compel you to copy the sutra. I do not insist, however, that you at least obey my command to write the titles of its 8 volumes. Yi Lung begged repeatedly to be excused. The ruler, now furious, said, "Your father was as much my subject as you are. If you refuse to write the titles for fear of being unfilial to him, I will charge you with disobedience of a royal decree." The ruler repeated his strict order several times. Yi Lung, though unwilling to be unfilial, realized that he could no longer disobey the royal command, so he wrote the titles of the 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra and presented his work to the ruler. Returning home, Ilung faced his father's grave and, shedding tears of blood, reported, obviously sincere tears, "The ruler commanded me so strictly that against your will I wrote the titles of the Lotus Sutra." In his grief at having been unable to escape the offense of being unfilial, he remained by the graveside for 3 days on end, fasting until he was on the verge of death. At the hour of the tiger, 3 to 5 a.m., on the third day, he was almost dead and felt as if he were dreaming. He looked up at the sky and saw a heavenly being who was like a painting of the deity Chakra, and whose multitude of followers filled both heaven and earth. Ilung asked him who he was. The heavenly being replied, "Do you not recognize me? I am your father, Wulung. While I was in the human world, I adhered to non-Buddhist scriptures and harbored enmity toward Buddhism, particularly toward the Lotus Sutra. For this reason, I fell into the hell of incessant suffering. Every day I had my tongue wrenched out several hundred times. Now I was dead. Now I was alive again. I kept crying out in agony, alternately looking up to heaven and flinging myself to the ground, but there was no one who would heed my screams. I wanted to tell the human world of my anguish, but there was no means to communicate. Whenever you insisted upon adhering to my will, your words would either turn into flames and torment me, or be transformed into swords that rained down from heaven upon me. Your behavior was unfilial in the extreme." What? "However, since you were acting thus in order to abide by my will, I knew I could not entertain a grudge against you, for I was only receiving the retribution for my own deeds." Now, that's quite a profound lesson. Of course, it's imagery, but you follow where the karma lies here, right? This unfilial conduct was of the father's making, not the son's. So when the son acted to his father's will, although it was unfilial in terms of enlightenment, awakening his father, the cause was made by the father, not the son. That's an important point. Continuing, "While I was thinking thus, a golden Buddha suddenly appeared in the hell of incessant suffering and declared, quote, 'Even those who have destroyed enough good causes to fill the entire realm of all phenomena, if they hear the Lotus Sutra just once, will never fail to attain enlightenment. You can't unknow it.' When this Buddha entered the hell of incessant suffering, it was as, remember the interdependent worlds? It's a good point to bring this out. Remember there's hell, hunger, animality, all the way up to Bodhisattva, Buddhahood. But each of those worlds has the other 9 in it. Or the other 10. You could say there's a hell of hell. Ugh. But there's a Bodhisattva of hell. There's in other words, all human suffering is an experience of life, albeit attached and thereby suffering. But you can, while in that attached suffering, awaken your Buddha mind and immediately wash away that suffering through releasing that attachment. Because Buddhahood is a completely different perspective on life. It's immediate. It was as if a deluge of water had been poured over a great fire. As my agony subsided a little, I joined my palms together in meditation and asked him what kind of Buddha he was. The Buddha replied, "I am the character Myo, one of the 64 characters that comprise the titles of the 8 volumes of the Lotus Sutra, which your son, Ilung, is now writing. As 8 characters form the title of each of the 8 volumes, A total of 64 Buddhas appeared and shone like 64 full moons, and the utter darkness of the hell of incessant suffering was instantly transformed into a dazzling brilliance. What a colorful story. Moreover, in accordance with the principle that any place without changing its characteristics is a Buddha land, right? Everything is enlightenment. It's just a shift of perception. The hell of incessant suffering immediately became the capital of eternally tranquil light. I and all other inmates became Buddhas seated on lotus blossoms, and we are now ascending to the inner court of the Tushita heaven. This I am reporting to you before anyone else. Remember, this is all a vision that the son has as he's crying in his woe that he hasn't followed his father's will. But he never should have. He just didn't know, right? Yi Lung said, quote, "It is my hand that wrote the titles. How could you have been saved? Moreover, I did not write them with sincerity. How could it possibly have helped you?" His father replied, "How ignorant you are. Your hand is my hand, and your body is my body. The characters you write are the characters I write." This is karmic relations. Remember the fifth meditation in Gongyo. This is how we honor our past and future relatives. They're relative in samsara because they are instantiation of connected karmic manifestation. Although you had no resolve or conviction in your heart, you nevertheless wrote the titles with your hand. Copy, recite, propagate. He was practicing and didn't realize it. Therefore, I have already been saved. Think of a child who sets fire to something and without the least intention in doing so causes it to be burned. The same holds true with the Lotus Sutra. If one professes resolve in it, one will surely become a Buddha, even though one may not expect it in the least. Now that you understand this principle, never slander the Lotus Sutra. Since we are among the laity, however, we are in a better position to repent of our past slanderous words, no matter how grave they may have been. You can always correct course. Yi Lung reported all of this to the ruler, and the ruler said to him, "My wish has been answered with splendid results." From then on, Yi Lung basked increasingly in the royal favor, and the entire populace of the country came to revere the Lotus Sutra. The late now he gets back to the mother. The late Goro, the son that she lost, and the late lay priest Matsuno were, respectively, your son and father. You are the lay priest's or monk's daughter. I believe, therefore, that he must at this very moment be in the inner court of the Tushita heaven. Hokibo, I will read and explain this letter to you. Since I wrote it in haste, it was impossible to furnish details. With my deep respect, Nichiren. I'd like to know what else he was going to say. But this is, there are many lessons in this. Cause and effect. Sometimes the causes we make, we're not conscious of the effect that they're going to have, right? Many of us just stumble through life. And then when things happen, sometimes we're shocked by that. How did that come about? Other times we go, well, I don't like it, but I think I know why that's happening, right? Come on, humans. We all go through it. The point is that we don't always understand what effects we will bring about by the thoughts, words, and deeds, actions that we take, even within our own minds. And this is to the point, because it is in our minds where these myriad worlds are constantly penetrating one another and making little micro decisions about how we feel about something. And how we feel about it is how we think about it, and that's causal. Everything in Buddhism is about that attitude and the intent of the mind. And when all those minute little thoughts get together and result in an actual action, that is a major cause and will undoubtedly have an effect. And so the cause and effect relationship that in this story, in this expedient means, is to say that not only do your causes have an effect on your own life, but they affect all the lives with which you're intertwined. Certainly your own relations, backwards and forwards, but even with those interrelationships that are around those relationships. My mother, certainly. My mother's friends also. Because as I affect my mother, so too do I affect her relationships of friendships around her. Right? Self and environment are one. And that's really hard to perceive as a human, mortal, samsaric being. But that's a limitation we've put on ourselves because we're so attached to this stuff, right? Appearance, touch, feel, taste, all these consciousnesses are all identity, identity, identity. This is what we talk about the ego. The ego is a construct of all of those consciousnesses assembling into an identifiable, distinct thing. But that's the great illusion. We don't want to get rid of it. We want to use it. Because with all of this comes the mind. The mind is born of this. And so if we change the mind to a mind that perceives without the appendages of attachments and just sees the wonder of this creation of attachments and the force that brings it about, our perspective completely changes. And so when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, we are shifting our mind's perspective from the thingness and the desires and all of that stuff to simply seeing clearly, perceiving clearly what is going on. A lot of analogies went through my head, but I feel like I'd be repeating myself. And maybe I should. Hopefully this was meaningful for you and you grab something of insight out of it to help you with your practice. If so, let me know in the comments. If not, let me know in the comments. Really proud of your practice. Don't forget, if it's helpful to you, you can download all of these videos as oral podcasts wherever you get your podcast. The Buddhahood Podcast, all 3 words. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for being here. Please take care of your health so that you can practice and awaken, right? And be kind to one another, to yourself. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now. Hey, thank you for being here. Did you know there's a 3rd way you can help support this channel? And it won't cost you a cent. Yep, if you are not able to be a patron on Patreon or use the PayPal me at .com at Sifu Sylvain, because you don't have the financial fortune to help support this channel right now, you, as I say, always support this channel by watching, but you can also help us grow so that maybe one day we can get over 10,000 subscribers and YouTube will grace us with monetization. It's not a lot, but if you can make sure you're subscribed and share a video like a simple one, just go into the search criteria and type monk, and you'll have a video that'll come up that's been up for years about what is a monk. You know, it's called monk, who, how, where, something like that. That might be a great introduction to somebody who doesn't understand what a monk is to begin with. It's a tool. Use this channel as a tool to help you with your bodhisattva practice, and share a video to somebody who you think, oh, I know somebody who'll benefit from watching this. And in that way, you can help us grow. And that's a really good way to help your practice along as well. So just wanted to drop that in on you in case that's something that you might find useful. Take care of yourself again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.